At 3:47 a.m. on September 12, 2024, I watched a nurse I'd never seen before walk into room 428 and inject something into my patient's IV line. 6 minutes later, he flatlined. I'm Sarah Chen. I've worked at Detroit Memorial Hospital for 8 years, graveyard shift in the ER. I've seen some terrible things, but nothing like this. The next morning, I reported her to my charge nurse, Linda Patterson. I described the woman, older, maybe late 50s, old-fashioned nurse's cap, the kind nobody wears anymore, really pale skin, and this smell, like formaldehyde mixed with something sweet and rotting. Linda went completely white, like all the color just drained from her face. She said, "Describe her again, every detail." So I did. The cap, the pale skin, the outdated uniform with the name tag that said E. Fowler. Linda opened her desk drawer with shaking hands and pulled out a laminated ID badge. It was yellowed with age from 1987. The photo showed the exact same woman. Eleanor Fowler, registered nurse, Detroit Memorial Hospital. Deceased, October 3rd, 1987. She died in this building, in the basement, and according to Linda, I'm not the first person to see her.
Okay, so let me back up and explain why this is so messed up. Detroit Memorial Hospital opened in 1962. It's this massive, brutalist concrete building on the east side. You know the type, right? Built during the Cold War when everything looked like a bomb shelter. No windows in half the building, weird hallways that don't make sense, and a basement that goes down 3 levels. I started working there in 2016, right out of nursing school. The ER is intense. Detroit, Gunshot wounds, overdoses, car accidents. We see everything. My shift is 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., the graveyard. The hospital's been struggling for years. Budget cuts, staff layoffs, half the building isn't even used anymore. They locked off the entire 7th and 8th floors back in 2019. Not enough patients to justify keeping them open. But the ER never stops, never sleeps. There's always been stories, you know what I mean? Every hospital has them. The nurse who sees a patient in a room that's supposed to be empty, the elevator that goes to the basement on its own. Whisper. The morgue door that opens from the inside. I always thought it was just like hospital folklore, people getting spooked working nights, your mind playing tricks when you're exhausted. I was wrong. The first time something felt off was about 6 months ago, March 2024. We had this patient come in, Marcus Webb, 34 years old, stabbing victim. He was stable, not critical. We patched him up, got him comfortable in room 428. I was doing my rounds around 3 a.m. when I noticed the smell, that formaldehyde smell I mentioned. Sweet and chemical and wrong. I thought maybe housekeeping used some weird new cleaner, but when I walked past room 428, whisper, the smell was strongest there. I looked through the window in the door, and I swear, I saw someone standing next to Marcus's bed, just standing there, completely still. But when I opened the door, nobody, just Marcus, sleeping. Whisper, that should have been my first warning.
September 12th. The night everything changed. We had a pretty quiet shift until around 2 a.m. Then they brought in James Holloway, 52 years old, heart attack patient. He was stable when we admitted him to room 428. Yeah, that same room. I was charting at the nurse's station around 3:30 when I smelled it again. That smell, formaldehyde and something sweet and rotten. I looked up, and that's when I saw her for the first time. She was walking down the hallway toward room 428. Older woman, maybe late 50s, wearing this old-style nurse uniform, like the white dress with the cap. Nobody wears those anymore. They went out of style in the 80s. I didn't recognize her, and I know everyone on night shift. There's only 12 of us. I figured maybe she was from another department, filling in, but something felt wrong. The way she moved, too smooth, too slow. And she didn't acknowledge me at all, just walked right past the nurse's station like I wasn't even there. I watched her go into room 428. I waited for her to come out. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes. That's when I got up to check on her. I walked to room 428 and looked through the window. She was standing next to James's bed. She had a syringe in her hand, and she was injecting something into his IV line. I opened my mouth to ask what she was doing, but before I could say anything, she turned her head and looked right at me. Her eyes, they were completely black. No whites, just black. I blinked, and she was gone. Just vanished. And that's when the monitor started screaming, "Flatline." I ran in there with Dr. Rodriguez and we tried everything, CPR, defibrillator, everything. But James Holloway was gone. Time of death, 3:47 a.m. Dr. Rodriguez said it was another heart attack. Made sense, right? He already had cardiac issues. But I knew what I saw. I knew someone killed him. After Linda showed me that ID badge, I couldn't let it go. Eleanor Fowler died in 1987, and I saw her in 2024. Linda told me to drop it. She actually said, "Sarah, for your own good, forget what you saw." But here's the thing. I'm not the kind of person who just forgets, especially when a patient dies right in front of me. So I started digging. I went down to HR the next day and asked about Eleanor Fowler. The woman at the desk, Janet, she got this weird look on her face. Fear, like genuine fear. She said all personnel records from before 1995 were archived in the basement, sublevel 3. If I wanted to see them, I'd have to go down there myself. Nobody goes to sublevel 3, like ever. It's where they keep old records and broken equipment. I've been working there 8 years and never once went below the regular basement. I went after my shift ended, around 8 a.m., took the Sordus elevator down. The doors opened and the smell hit me immediately. That formaldehyde smell. It was everywhere down there. The records room was at the end of this long hallway, fluorescent lights flickering, some of them completely dead. The floor was this old linoleum, cracked and peeling. I found the box marked Nursing Staff 1985 to 1990 and started going through files. That's when I found Eleanor Fowler's employment record. Hired, June 1st, 1974. Deceased, October 3rd, 1987. Cause of death, accident in hospital morgue, exposure to embalming chemicals. She died in the morgue, in this building. But that wasn't the worst part. Clipped to her file was a handwritten note dated October 5th, 1987, 2 days after she died. It said, "Third sighting confirmed, room 312, patient expired 3:45 a.m. E. Fowler observed by night staff. Recommend immediate investigation." I grabbed more files, started pulling everything from 1987 and 1988. October 1987. Patient expired unexpectedly, room 428, 3:52 a.m. Staff reports unknown nurse present. November 1987. Unexplained death, room 218, 3:41 a.m. Description matches deceased employee E. Fowler. December 1987. Patient death, room 506, 3:38 a.m. E. Fowler sighting confirmed. It went on for months. Different rooms, different patients, but always around 3:45 a.m. And every single report mentioned the same thing: an injection into the IV line. Eleanor Fowler had been killing patients for almost 40 years, and the hospital knew. I spent the next 3 days going through every file I could find, and I found a report, buried deep, from October 3rd, 1987, the day Eleanor died. It was an incident report filed by the hospital security director, and it told me everything. On October 3rd, 1987, at approximately 11:30 p.m., Eleanor Fowler was found unconscious in the hospital morgue on sublevel 3. She had severe chemical burns, exposure to formaldehyde and other embalming chemicals. The report said she was discovered during a routine security check. But then there was this line, handwritten in the margin. Whisper. Patient family member reported seeing nurse enter morgue. Security investigated. A patient family member saw her go down there. I kept reading. Eleanor was rushed to the ER, but died from chemical exposure and respiratory failure at 2:17 a.m. They did an autopsy. And that's where it gets really messed up. The autopsy report noted unexplained findings. Eleanor Fowler had high levels of potassium chloride in her system, like really high levels. Potassium chloride is what they use in lethal injections. It stops your heart. But here's the thing. The medical examiner noted that the potassium chloride wasn't recent. It had been in her system for years. I needed to know more about Eleanor, who she was, why she was doing this. I found her home address in the personnel file, an apartment in Highland Park about 20 minutes from the hospital. I drove there on my day off. The building was still standing, but completely abandoned now. Boarded up windows, graffiti everywhere. I shouldn't have gone inside. I know I shouldn't have, but I did. Her apartment was on the 3rd floor. The door was open, hanging off its hinges. Inside was just emptiness. Everything was long gone, just trash and water damage. But I found something in the closet. A box, pushed way back in the corner. It was still there after almost 40 years because nobody cared enough to clean the place out properly. Inside were photographs, letters, a diary. Eleanor Fowler had a daughter. Her name was Rebecca, born 1968, and in 1973, when Rebecca was 5 years old, she was kidnapped. She was kidnapped from a playground 3 blocks from their apartment, taken by a registered sex offender named David Marsh. He'd just been released from prison 2 weeks earlier. They found Rebecca's body 4 days later in an abandoned building. Eleanor had newspaper clippings in her box, articles about David Marsh, about the trial. He got 25 years, but because of overcrowding and good behavior, he was released after 12. Released in 1985. I went back to the hospital records, cross-checked the patient list. David Marsh was admitted to Detroit Memorial Hospital on November 3rd, 1985, severe pneumonia. He died November 5th, 1985, 3:44 a.m., room 507. Eleanor's shift. That was her first kill, the man who murdered her daughter. And after that, she couldn't stop. It was like something broke inside her. She started seeing evil in other patients, started believing she was protecting people, protecting other children from monsters like David Marsh. Her diary entries got darker and darker. By 1987, she was writing things like, I can feel them, the evil ones. They glow differently. I know who they are the moment they arrive. She thought she had some kind of power, some kind of ability to identify predators and abusers. And the really messed up part? She was right. Every single person she killed had done something terrible. I don't know how she knew. Maybe she'd learned to spot certain behaviors. Maybe she accessed their records somehow. Or maybe she really could sense it. The last diary entry was dated October 2nd, 1987, the day before she died. It said, "They're trying to stop me. The administrators. They told me I'm on leave, but I can't stop. There's one more, room 428. He hurt a child. I saw him admitted tonight. I have to help them transition before they send me away. I have to go to the morgue first. I need more potassium chloride. They moved my supply." She went to the morgue to steal the chemicals she'd been using. And something happened down there. Maybe she knocked over containers. Maybe she got trapped. Maybe someone else was down there. Someone who didn't want her to continue. But she died, and the hospital covered up everything. The murders, the cover-up, all of it. And Eleanor's spirit, it just kept going, kept following her mission for 37 years.
3 nights after I found Eleanor's apartment, she came for me. September 28th, 2:30 a.m. I was on shift. We had a patient admitted around midnight. Thomas Brennan, 44 years old, car accident, broken ribs, concussion, nothing life-threatening. I was doing routine checks when I noticed his admission form. Under emergency contact, he'd listed a daughter, Chelsea Brennan, age 9. Something made me look him up. I don't know why, just a feeling. Thomas Brennan had a restraining order against him, filed by his ex-wife. Allegations of abuse against Chelsea. And I knew Eleanor would come for him. Sure enough, at 3:30 a.m., I smelled it. That formaldehyde smell. I ran to the nurse's station and grabbed the phone to call security, but before I could dial, the lights went out. The entire floor, just darkness. Emergency lights kicked in. That red glow, you know what I mean? Everything looks like a nightmare in emergency lighting. And that's when I saw her. Eleanor Fowler, standing at the end of the hallway, just watching me. I couldn't move. I literally couldn't move. My legs just froze. She started walking toward me, that same slow, smooth walk, and as she got closer, I could see her face clearly for the first time. She looked exactly like her photo, but her skin was gray, like corpse gray, and her eyes, solid black, no whites at all. She stopped about 10 feet away from me. And then she spoke. Her voice sounded like it was coming from underwater, distorted and wet and wrong. She said, "You know what he did." I nodded. I couldn't speak. She said, "Then you know why I have to help him transition." I finally found my voice. I said, "Eleanor, you have to stop. You've been doing this for almost 40 years. How many people have you killed?" She tilted her head like a confused dog, and she said, "Killed? I don't kill. I help them transition before they hurt more children, before they destroy more families, like David destroyed mine." I said, "But you're dead, Eleanor. You died in 1987. She looked down at her hands, like she was seeing them for the first time, and when she looked back up at me, there was confusion in those black eyes. I died? And just like that, the lights came back on. Eleanor screamed, this horrible, wet, gurgling scream, and she ran. Not toward Thomas Brennan's room, she ran the other way, toward the stairwell that leads to the basement. I chased her. I don't know why I chased her. It was stupid, but I did. I followed her down the stairs, down to sub-level 1, sub-level 2. She went all the way down to sub-level 3, to the morgue. The door was open. I could see her standing inside, in the exact spot where she died. There were old chemical stains on the floor, marks that had never been cleaned up properly, and she was standing right in the middle of them. She looked at me and said, "I can't stop. Even when I want to, I can't stop." And then she vanished. Just disappeared, like she was never there.
I went straight to hospital administration the next morning. I told them everything. Eleanor Fowler, the deaths, the cover-up, the basement, all of it. The hospital CEO, Richard Morrison, listened to my whole story without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Miss Chen, you've been working very hard. Night shifts are exhausting. Have you considered taking some personal time?" I couldn't believe it. I said, "Did you hear what I just told you? There's a ghost killing patients in this hospital." He said, "I heard you describe symptoms of extreme exhaustion and possibly hallucinations brought on by sleep deprivation. What I'm suggesting is that you take a leave of absence, paid, 4 weeks, get some rest." It was a threat. He was basically saying, "Take the time off and shut up or we'll make you leave permanently." I left his office and went straight to the police. I filed a report at the Detroit Police Department, showed them Eleanor's files, the patient death records, everything. The detective, Marcus Johnson, he actually listened. He said he'd investigate. 3 days later, he called me back, said the hospital's legal team claimed all those files were part of an ongoing quality review and protected by attorney-client privilege. They threatened to sue the police department if they continued investigating. The case was closed. But here's the thing. Thomas Brennan, the patient in room 428 that night, he survived. Eleanor didn't kill him. After I chased her to the morgue, she never came back. He recovered from his injuries and was discharged 4 days later. I looked him up 6 weeks later. He'd lost custody of his daughter. His ex-wife had gone back to court with new evidence. He was arrested for child endangerment. So, maybe Eleanor got what she wanted anyway. She scared me enough that I protected that patient. And because he survived, he ended up in prison where he belonged. I don't know. I took the 4 weeks leave. I needed it. I wasn't sleeping. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Eleanor's black eyes staring at me. When I came back, Linda pulled me aside. She said 3 other nurses had seen Eleanor over the years. She said 3 other nurses had seen Eleanor over the years. All 3 quit immediately after, never told anyone outside the hospital. I asked her why she was still working there. She said, because somebody has to bear witness. Somebody has to remember those 47 people Eleanor killed. Somebody has to make sure it doesn't get completely buried. I respected that. I decided to stay too. That was 4 months ago. It's February 2025 now. I'm still working at Detroit Memorial Hospital, still on night shift. Eleanor hasn't appeared since that night in September. The formaldehyde smell is gone. No more sightings. No more unexplained deaths at 3:45 a.m. Linda thinks she's gone, that confronting her, making her remember she was dead, somehow released her. I want to believe that. The hospital is still here, still struggling. They're talking about closing the whole building by 2027, moving operations to a newer facility in Dearborn. The 7th and 8th floors are still abandoned. The basement is still there. Sublevel 3 and the morgue are still exactly as they were in 1987. I went down there again 2 weeks ago. I don't know why. Just needed to see it. The chemical stains on the morgue floor are still there, the spot where Eleanor died. But something was different. There was a syringe, just sitting on the floor, right in the middle of the stain. It wasn't there before. I know it wasn't. I picked it up and looked at it closely. It was empty, but there was a label on it. Potassium chloride. I threw it in the hazmat disposal and got out of there. I've been watching the patient admissions more carefully now, looking for certain profiles, people with violent histories, child abusers, predators. And here's what I noticed. They don't get admitted anymore, not to Detroit Memorial. I checked with other hospitals in the area. Those patients are going to Henry Ford, to Sinai Grace, to Harper, but not to Detroit Memorial. It's like they're being diverted, like something is keeping them away from this building. Or someone. Last week, I was talking to Janet from HR. I asked her how long she'd been working here. She said 32 years, since 1993. I asked her if she'd ever heard stories about Eleanor Fowler. She got quiet. Then she said, "Everyone who works here long enough hears the stories, but here's what they don't tell you. Eleanor's not the only one." I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "This hospital has been here since 1962. Lots of people have died in this building, staff and patients, and some of them don't leave." She told me about a doctor who hanged himself in the 7th floor supply closet in 1979. People still see him up there. A patient who jumped from the 8th floor window in 1968. Her screaming is heard on windy nights. A security guard who had a heart attack in the parking garage in 2003. His flashlight is sometimes seen moving through the lower levels. This whole building is haunted, not just by Eleanor, by decades of death and suffering. And we just keep working here, keep admitting patients, keep pretending it's normal. Here's the part I haven't told anyone. 2 nights ago, February 1st, I was working my shift. Around 3 a.m., we got a patient admission. Gregory Price, 38 years old. Stab wound to the abdomen, non-life-threatening. I was processing his paperwork when I noticed something in his medical history. Previous arrests, sexual assault, multiple victims, all children. He'd served 15 years, got released 6 months ago. And I felt it. This rage, this overwhelming rage, like fire in my chest. I looked at him lying there in room 428. Yeah, they put him in that room. And I thought, nobody would know. Nobody would question it if he died. He's already injured. 1 dose of potassium chloride, it would look like complications from the stabbing. I walked to the supply room. I found myself opening the medication cabinet. My hand was reaching for the potassium chloride before I even realized what I was doing. And that's when I smelled it. Formaldehyde. I turned around, and Eleanor was standing right behind me. But this time she looked different. Her eyes weren't black anymore. They were just sad. Human. She said, "Don't. Please don't." I said, "But he hurt children. You killed people like him for 40 years. And she said, "And look what it cost me. Look what I became." I'm trapped here, Sarah, trapped in the moment of my death, trapped in my obsession. I can't move on. I can't rest. I can't even remember my daughter's face anymore. All I remember is the rage. Don't become me. And then she was gone. I put the medication back. I walked away. Gregory Price was discharged 3 days later. I reported his presence to his parole officer. He's back in custody now for violating the terms of his release. The system worked, for once. But here's what keeps me up at night. I wanted to kill him. I was going to kill him. If Eleanor hadn't stopped me, I would have done it. And the hospital? They would have covered it up. Just like they covered up Eleanor's murders. Just like they cover up everything. I keep thinking about what Janet said, about all the ghosts in this building. What if they're not haunting us? What if we're creating them? What if the hospital itself, the stress, the death, the cover-ups, the evil we see every single night, what if it makes people into monsters? What if Eleanor was just a grieving mother until this place twisted her into something else? What if I'm next? I handed in my resignation yesterday. My last shift is February 14th, Valentine's Day. Kind of ironic. Linda asked me why I'm leaving. I told her I got a job at a clinic in Ann Arbor. Better hours, better pay. But the truth is, I'm scared. I'm scared of what I almost did. I'm scared of what this place is doing to me. I'm scared I'll end up like Eleanor, trapped forever in these hallways, trapped in my rage and my need for justice. If you work in healthcare, especially night shift, please listen to me. Watch yourself. Watch for the signs. When you start thinking certain patients deserve to die, when you start feeling like you should be the one to decide who lives and who doesn't. Get out. Get therapy. Take a break. Do whatever you have to do. Because once you cross that line, once you become the thing you were supposed to fight against, you might never come back. Detroit Memorial Hospital is scheduled to close in 2027. They're going to demolish it, turn it into luxury condos or a parking lot or whatever. But I wonder, when they tear down those walls, what happens to the people trapped inside them? Do they finally get released? Do they move on? Or do they just find a new building, a new hospital, new victims? 3 days ago, I got a call from Harper Hospital. They're hiring for night shift, good pay, full benefits. I'm going for an interview next week. And I swear to God, when they told me the position was available, when they described the shift, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., I smelled formaldehyde. So maybe Eleanor was right. Maybe I'm already becoming her. Or maybe she's following me. Either way, I'll see you on the night shift.